Welcome to the Explainer. Is your brain actually creating your thoughts and feelings, or is it more like a receiver, just tuning in to a cosmic broadcast? We are about to dive into a theory that could seriously change how you see, well, everything.
So let's start with a really fundamental mystery. Just think about your own experience, right now. The feeling of watching this, the thoughts running through your head, that whole inner movie of your life. Where does all of that actually, truly come from?
You know, the conventional answer, the one we all learned in school, points directly to that 3-pound lump of tissue between your ears. It's all just the incredibly complex, beautiful firing of billions of neurons inside your skull. Simple as that. Or is it?
Well, there's this really audacious theory called cosmopsychism. That's cosmos and psyche put together. And it suggests the total opposite. What if consciousness isn't generated in the brain at all? What if your brain is simply receiving it, like a radio picking up a signal?
Now, to really get why this radio theory is even on the table, we first have to understand a massive gap in our current scientific knowledge. It's a challenge so profound, it's literally just called the hard problem.
So here's the thing. Neuroscientists are brilliant. They can map the brain's activity down to the neuron. They can see the neural correlates of consciousness. You know, the exact brain patterns that fire up when you see the color red. But they have absolutely no idea why that brain activity feels red. Why does it feel like anything at all?
And this right here is the core of the issue. Science gives us this perfectly good, objective, third-person description of brain stuff. But that's a completely different world from our subjective, first-person experience. You know, the actual feeling of joy, the sound of music, the taste of coffee. There's just this massive, unbridged gap between the two.
And hey, this isn't some new problem. People have been banging their heads against this wall for over a century. The idea of physical nerves creating a non-physical feeling has been compared to a genie just magically appearing when you rub a lamp. It doesn't seem to follow any kind of logic.
So this huge gap in what we know, it kind of forces us to question a really basic assumption. Where does consciousness even live? I mean, is a brain really required for this stuff?
Just look at the evidence that's piling up. We're seeing sophisticated cognitive abilities all over the place in creatures that don't have a centralized brain. You've got octopus arms that seem to think for themselves, slime molds that can solve mazes. It's really forcing us to question our cerebral chauvinism, you know, that old bias that brains are the only game in town for intelligence.
So the standard story we've been told is that the brain is a generator. It takes completely non-conscious, physical stuff, you know, atoms and molecules, and through sheer complexity, it just somehow, poof, creates subjective experience out of nothing.
But cosmopsychism flips that idea completely on its head. It says the brain isn't a generator at all. It's a modulator. It's more like a complex filter or a tuner, just tapping into a field of consciousness that's already out there, everywhere.
Okay, so let's get to the really mind-bending part of this whole idea. It all hinges on this concept of a universal broadcast, a field of consciousness that permeates all of reality.
The theory calls it a ubiquitous field of consciousness, or UFC for short. Just try to imagine this formless, omnipresent ocean of potential experience. It's as fundamental to the cosmos as gravity or electromagnetism is. It's just there.
Now, think of this universal field as having two sides, like a coin. From the outside, the way physics would see it, it just looks like energy and frequencies. But from the inside, it is the raw material of experience itself. It's the phenomenal color palette from which all possible feelings are painted.
So, the million-dollar question, right? If this giant ocean of consciousness is out there, how in the world does your specific individual brain actually create your stream of consciousness from it?
The key is thought to be resonance. Think about it like this. Groups of your neurons start vibrating together at very specific frequencies. This creates a coherent state that lets the brain tune in to that universal field. By doing that, it extracts a very specific slice of experience. It's just like a radio tuner locking onto a single station from all the noise. Your brain doesn't invent the feeling of red, it just selects it from that pre-existing cosmic palette.
Okay, now, I know what you might be thinking. This sounds a lot like philosophy, maybe even a little sci-fi, right? Well, this is where the theory makes a really specific, testable connection to the world of modern physics.
So the theory doesn't just make this field up, it actually identifies it with something physicists already study, the zero-point field.
This is a very real sea of background energy that exists everywhere in the universe, even in the total vacuum of empty space. It is a fundamental part of our cosmos.
And here is where it gets super interesting. Neuroscientists have found that when you're consciously aware of something, huge networks across your brain synchronize. They start firing together in this coherent rhythm. And this large-scale coherence is exactly what you'd need for the brain to couple with a universal energy field. It would be acting less like a simple computer and more like a complex quantum antenna.
So, what's the ultimate takeaway here? Why does thinking of your brain as a radio and not a generator actually change anything? Well, it changes everything.
This one simple idea elegantly sidesteps the hard problem. The brain's job isn't some impossible task of creating subjective feeling from dead matter. No, its job is to modulate and refine a consciousness that is already there to begin with. In this view, consciousness is fundamental to the cosmos. It's not some rare, bizarre accident of complex biology that just happened on one tiny planet. It's a basic feature of reality, and complex systems like our brains have just learned how to tap into it and shape it. And that, of course, leaves us with a profound and maybe even a little unsettling final question to chew on. If your brain is just one kind of receiver tuning into this universal broadcast of consciousness, what other kinds of receivers are out there, and what channels are they tuned to?